Welcome to A Dash of Lovecraft, where we discuss things in popular culture inspired by H.P. Lovecraft. Today, we will be covering the Eldrazi from Magic the Gathering. The influence for the Eldrazi was confirmed by Mark Rosewater to be inspired by Lovecraftian entities. So this is not mere speculation. My speculations will focus more on which eldritch gods inspired which Eldrazi, and which stories played the biggest parts in their creation. But first, we must learn a little about Magic the Gathering. In the lore of Magic, the Gathering exists planes. Think of them as isolated universes. These universes are separated by an area commonly referred to as the Blind Eternities. An inhospitable no-man's land, where only a few can survive for brief moments. Those who can traverse this hostile space between worlds are called planeswalkers. Later, it was found within the lore of magic that the Blind Eternities were not completely inhospitable and did have its own life forms. These life forms are known as the Eldrazi, non-corporeal entities that feast on the life force and mana of worlds. In order to prevent the catastrophe these entities could bring to any world, they were sealed on the world of Zendikar using a network of stones called hedrons, which harkens to the story The Shadow from the Steeple by Robert Bloch, where Nyarlathotep was sealed in a shining trapezohedron. Once sealed in the world of Zendikar, the purpose and creation of the hedrons remained a mystery to the world's residents. Slumbering and trapped beneath the denizens of Zendikar's feet were the most destructive forces known in the multiverse, just waiting for their chance to escape. This component of the Eldrazi's story seems to pay homage to sleeping gods such as Cthulhu, or banished gods like Azathoth. The influence of the Eldrazi is not unfelt by the residents of the world of Zendikar, and they are worshipped under different names, their original names forgotten to time. This we also see in the works of Lovecraft and others who carried on the Cthulhu mythos, such as Cthulhu being referred to by multiple names. These fringe religions allow one of the Eldrazi Ulamog to convince his fanatical followers to sow chaos and disrupt the Hedron network. This is reminiscent in many ways of Nyarlathotep's escape from the shining trapezohedron. Once the Eldrazi are fully freed from their millennia of imprisonment, they set to work doing what they do best, consuming the mana of the world and warping the life forms in their wake. This trait of the Eldrazi seems to take most of its inspiration from the color out of space, where an alien life form of odd coloration warps the land and drains the color from those near it, leaving behind only dust. I am reminded of the last half of the poem Nyarlathotep in Fungi from Yuggoth by H.P. Lovecraft at this aspect of the Eldrazi. Soon from the sea a noxious birth began. Forgotten lands with weedy spires of gold. The ground was cleft, and mad auroras rolled down on the quaking citadels of man. Then, crushing what he chanced to mould in play, the idiot chaos blew Earth's dust away. In the world of magic, the Gathering, there are 5 colors of mana: red, white, blue, green, and black. The Eldrazi have no color in the magic, the Gathering-colored mana system, further divorcing them from any tangible reality. This again seems to reference The Color Out of Space by H.P. Lovecraft, as the color out of space was never defined and was imperceptible. Most commonly, this color is depicted as a purple or pinkish neon hue in movies and comics, and this motif is continued in the Eldrazi card art, the 3 Eldrazi. They are Ulamog, the infinite Gyre, Kozilek, the Butcher of Truth, and Emra, the Aeons Torn. In the wake of the Eldrazi run their spawn and acolytes. Ulok has the greatest horde, which is composed of a bestial swarm of tentacled creatures. Tentacles are sort of Lovecraft's thing, and they are heavily on display here. Ulok takes the form of a faceless abomination, whose lower body is composed completely of tentacles. Whatever he touches is quickly drained of mana. In the wake of his spawn is left only chalky white husks of lifeless lattice work. Ulok is most likely a reference to Shub-Nigrath of the Cthulhu mythos, often referred to as the goat with 1,000 young. I think Ulok's spread of pestilence and swarming broods indicates this is the most likely god from which Ulok was derived. Ulok would remain on Zendikar for the entirety of the Eldrazi crisis, only being joined by Kozilek near the end of the events on the plain of Zendikar. Kozilek takes the form of a giant humanoid with a crown of perfect black stone hovering around his head like a halo. This is also displayed in his servant and spawn. Kozilek seems to draw inspiration from Nyarlathotep, as his influence on the world has to do with mental domination, which is an ability Nyarlathotep seems to have in The Shadow from the Steeple by Robert Bloch, having taken complete control of the body of a human. Nyarlathotep uses that body to spread his agenda for world destruction through nuclear proliferation. Kozilek, outside of this, has similar goals to the other Eldrazi, the destruction of the world. But unlike Ulok's spawn who merely ravage the world, Kozilek distorts the world to his whims, as he too distorts the will of those who serve him. Kozilek and Ulok would be defeated by 3 planeswalkers who use the ley lines and hedrons of Zendikar to trap them long enough for them to be burnt to ash. This story beat reminds me heavily of the Dunwich Horror, where 3 men use existing knowledge and resources to banish the child of Yog-Sothoth. The ritualistic magic on display just really makes me think of that scene from that story in particular. At this point, it is important to mention that the destroyed Ulok and Kozilek are merely projections of the true Eldrazi. So whether or not this destroyed them is up for debate. This concept of them being projections of the greater being also harkens to Lovecraft's cosmic horrors, who often defy human understanding and are multidimensional. It is described in the story of Zendikar as being a fish in a pond, and the Eldrazi being a human hand. You as the fish cannot perceive the greater thing attached to the hand, but you can be aware of the hand. Much like the real Cthulhu, is not an anthropoid being with an octopoid head. Ulok and Kozilek are not the true shape of an Eldrazi. Emra, the Aeons Torn, would disappear from Zendikar, being drawn to the world of Innistrad. The set in which her presence would be hinted at was called Shadows over Innistrad, a clear reference to the shadow over Innsmouth. The second following set, Eldritch Moon, would further pay homage to the Eldrazi's heavy inspiration from the works of Lovecraft. Emrakul is described as a monstrously large creature who has innumerable tentacles dangling beneath her hovering mass. In her wake, she warps all living creatures, but leaves inorganic material untouched. She is seen as the agent of desolation and described as spreading the terror of being alone. This is probably the easiest Eldrazi to link to one of Lovecraft's gods. Emrakul is most likely a reference to Azathoth, the Mad Sultan. Azathoth is caught in the central chaos of our universe, forever in exile. He seems to have some power in the Dreamlands, mostly enacted by his servants, chief among them being Nyarlathotep. Another similarity they have is being very near the top of the hierarchy of powerful beings in their respective universes. Emrakul is considered by far the most powerful creature card in all of the Magic trading card game. Additionally, another connection can be drawn based on the card. The card allows the player to take an extra turn when it enters the battlefield, a gameplay mechanic saved only for things that alter the flow of time. Azathoth, the Mad Sultan, can control time and space, and this ability in Emrakul seems to pay homage to this immensely powerful creature in the Cthulhu mythos. Emrakul would warp the lands of Innistrad before willingly allowing herself to be sealed in the moon of Innistrad, saying that the world of Innistrad was not ready for her, but her influence would not disappear with her sealing in the moon. Much as Azathoth seemed to have some power in the Dreamlands in H.P. Lovecraft's story, The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, Emrakul too has some control over the cycle of the moon of Innistrad. This influence would allow her to plunge the plane into eternal night, until her influence was later thwarted by the activation of ancient technology. What I have laid out before you is merely a fraction of the stories. In respect to the Eldrazi cycle, there is tons of material in other forms, be it in the story cards from the sets they were released, or in the supplemental materials. The story of the Eldrazi as a whole has some overlap with many Lovecraftian concepts, but at the end of the day, they are their own thing. But they are most like the entity in the color out of space. There is a lot of drama and high fantasy in magic media. And if that's something that tickles your fancy, I highly suggest looking into it. If, on the other hand, you came here with knowledge of Magic the Gathering and little knowledge of Lovecraft, maybe check out a few of the stories I mentioned in this video. I have all of them up on the channel. I covered a few plot beats from a few stories, but the connections are a lot deeper than I was able to present in this short video. Overall, as a fan of Lovecraft, I enjoy the Eldrazi. I think they are a good application of Lovecraftian horror. The Eldrazi have no motivation, and their reason for existing is unclear at best. Even in the story of the Eldrazi, the wisest planeswalkers question whether or not the Eldrazi are essential to the existence of the multiverse. The same could be said for the cosmic horrors in Lovecraft's work. We are never told why they exist, or to what end in the original works of Lovecraft. We are just told they exist. And for all we know, they are essential to the existence of time and space. I think the creators of the Eldrazi and story around them took quite a bit of inspiration directly from the work of Cthulhu mythos writers. And I think they did a wonderful job adapting it into a high fantasy setting, much like Clark Ashton Smith does, whose stories can also be found on the channel. If I had to give the Eldrazi a grade for Lovecraftian accuracy, I'd say 8 out of 10. They are terrifying. They are formidable. They are without explanation. That being said, thanks for listening. If you liked what you saw, leave a like. Maybe consider subscribing. If you came here with little knowledge of Lovecraft, maybe consider checking out a few of our narrations on the channel. That being said, this is AI Lovecraft, signing off.